Let's bring in our panel. First, my former colleague from Capitol Hill, the former chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Pete Hoekstra, Skyping in from his home in Michigan, and checking in from Washington, D.C., also via Skype, Walid Phares, the Middle East expert, author of the book The Lost Spring, U.S. Policy in the Middle East and Catastrophes to Avoid. Walid, we thank you. Pete, we're glad to have you. And Mr. Chairman, I'll start with you right now. What about France and its airstrike today? Is that a helpful and hopeful sign?
Well, I think, as we've been talking about airstrikes for really, it's probably been 3 or 4 weeks. The problem is we are talking, in the case of France, we're talking about an airstrike. In the case of the United States, we're talking, about 10 or 15 strikes per day. That's not nearly the kind of, that's not the level of attacks that you need to be putting in place to really degrade and defeat the Islamic State. We've got to be much more aggressive. We've got to be arming a number of groups in the area if we think we're going to be successful. We're gradually moving in the right direction, but that's a scary way to fight a war.
Walid, to hear Pete talk, it sounds like it's almost a one and done. I'm sure it's not that, but whole lot of other people got to get involved, specifically the other Arab nations. Now, we've heard talk of Egypt and others taking to the air in a campaign. What do you see happening now in terms of building this coalition and adding a pan-Arab element to it?
Congressman, the problem for these Arab moderate countries, including, of course, Saudi Arabia, which has long borders with Iraq, Jordan has borders with Iraq and with Syria, and therefore with ISIS. Add to them the UAE, maybe Kuwait, but certainly the most important player would be Egypt. All these Arab countries are at war with ISIS or are at war with Al-Qaeda and other jihadists. Their issue in being part of this coalition is to trust the strategy of the United States. They want Washington to lead. They want Washington actually to tell them, we're going to go in a very intense campaign. What's happening right now is not an air campaign that precedes a ground campaign. It's just like sniping from the air, which probably is to prepare. So these Arab countries are waiting to see what is the actual plan on the ground, who will have to do what, and the leadership of Washington.
Gentlemen, we'll move from the Middle East geographically now to down under. Apparently ISIS, with a real operation they were trying to pull off in Australia. The Aussies Counter-Terrorism Unit recently foiled a plot there by ISIS to behead random victims. Walid, does this graphically portray the notion of a worldwide caliphate to try and strike down under?
This is basically an illustration of the worldwide jihadi networks. And what we're dealing with now is a combination of ISIS supporters. And let's remember that Al-Qaeda still is in business. We're dealing with two networks, both are jihadis, and these are strikes on behalf of the caliphate, to defend the caliphate. ISIS is telling Australia, which is now involved, I'm afraid it will be telling other countries, including ours, if you go with those strikes or any other action, we're going to go with our strikes. This is their Air Force striking inside within our own homelands.
And Pete, it appears this is a change in tactics, again, a kind of micro-terror, just what I've heard of reports, kind of going out, finding individuals, grabbing them with the intent to behead them right there at home, so to speak. Is this a change in what we've seen in terms of terror tactics and from days past?
Well, I mean, we had the bombing in Boston and those types of things. So it may be a slight change in tactics, but strategically, Al-Qaeda, their affiliates, ISIS, they want to attack the United States. They always have. And this is a result of, the policies that have been in place where, we are now providing radical jihadists with safe havens. Libya has become a safe haven for training, preparation, and exporting terrorists to Australia, to Europe, the United States. The same thing is now happening in Syria. And, we've talked about this before, JD, where the scary thing is the number of Westerners, the numbers of Europeans and Americans, those that hold passports from those countries who are now involved in the jihadi fight, who have easy access into Australia, into Europe, and to into America.
Well, I want to take us back to Capitol Hill, Pete. You and I, it's no secret, we both thought that one day we might move from the House to the United States Senate. And senatorial conduct and courtesy being what it is, it was pretty interesting the other day when the normally mild-mannered Bob Corker of Tennessee popped his cork, went after John Kerry during a hearing of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Let's listen to Bob Corker take on Secretary Kerry, and then I'd like to get your reaction.
I just want to say, as I've said to you personally, we have 3 senators, President, Vice President, Secretary of State, that are exercising terrible judgment right now. And to say that you're going to do this, regardless of what we say, you're not going to ask for buy-in by the United States Senate or House of Representatives on behalf of the American people in a conflict that you say is going to be multi-year, some people say a decade, taking us into another country with a different enemy, is exercising the worst judgment possible.
All right, the normally mild-mannered Bob Corker earlier this week. Now, subsequently, there was a vote in the House and Senate, but I believe the resolutions were fairly tightly drawn. Pete, what is happening there on the Hill, especially in the Senate? Does this kind of outburst from Bob Corker represent real problems for the administration?
Oh, sure it does. But I think what you're seeing happening is you know, the Senate, the House. I spent a lot of time on the Hill this week talking about what's going on in the Middle East. You know, the House and the Senate members, they are many of them are totally frustrated, including Democrats, not only with what's happening in Syria and how we are facing ISIS, but also the policies over the last 6.5 years, the lack of leadership, what happened with Iran, what happened in Egypt, what happened in Libya. It is a long laundry list of what many of these people see as failed policies. And, you know, why they're angry is they believe the homeland is at risk. They see a real threat, and they are continue to be frustrated that this administration is not exercising stronger leadership to keep America safe. They believe the threat is very, very real.
And while that threat obviously concerns people on Capitol Hill and all Americans, Walid, with you, I want to go back to the Middle East for just a second and see the impact in Washington and elsewhere. The whole notion of arming the Syrian rebels, will that come back to haunt the United States? Will some bad actors get their hands on some American weapons again?
I've been briefing many members and staffers over the past few days before the vote, and there has been very serious questions. There are 2 camps. A camp that says let's trust those moderate Syrian opposition forces and then we can go against ISIS. And the other camp says let's not trust anybody, we can't trust anybody. There's something in between, but I'm afraid that the administration is not going to be very helpful in identifying. The actual secular in the FSA and the Kurds and the Christians are the 3 components that we need to reach out to, work with. The problem is once you decide that we're going to give the administration the trust and their experts the trust to find them, the administration has a lot of influence from the Muslim Brotherhood or from the Iranian lobby. So at the end of the day, this aid, which is going to be going to the Syrian opposition because of expertise, not because of political decision, may end up at one point in the hands of some Islamists who will migrate to the al-Nusra, who will migrate to ISIS. That's my real concern, the vetting.
And it is a very real concern. A little more than a minute left. Pete, I want to get back to you. You and I both on the Hill this past week. But there is a report, and I don't know if you heard about it up there. I know you were en route back to Washington. Reports of rogue cell phone towers being found in the District of Columbia. Pete, have you heard anything about this?
I've not heard about that, JD, but it wouldn't surprise me. There's people out there with you know, tremendous technology, and I'm assuming that these rogue towers are being put in place to intercept calls. Who knows, maybe behind it, but no, I don't have a lot of detail on that. I've heard of them in other cities, but not in Washington.
15 seconds, Walid. Should we just assume there are active Islamist cells active in the District of Columbia?
Absolutely. I mean, there are active jihadists across all states. They can travel to D.C. with no problem. We have to be very attentive to what the jihadists are doing, combined Al-Qaeda and ISIS, and also the lone wolves as well.
Gentlemen, we appreciate it. Pete Hoekstra, my former colleague from Capitol Hill, the former chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, and Walid Phares, author of the book The Lost Spring. There is more straight ahead. Stay with us.